No one had touched Kang Min-jae in 10 years. Not a handshake, not a pat on the shoulder, not even the accidental brush of fingers when passing documents across his mahogany desk. His men knew the rule. Everyone knew the rule. The Korean Mafia boss who built an empire on fear and precision had drawn an invisible barrier around his body that no living soul dared to cross. Until tonight, the music had stopped mid-song, leaving only the echo of expensive heels on marble and the collective held breath of 200 people who suddenly realized something was very wrong. Zuri Thompson stood in the center of the ballroom, her dark skin glistening with sweat under the crystal chandeliers, wearing a crimson dress that clung to every curve of her dancer's body. She had been hired to perform, to entertain, to disappear when her 15 minutes were done and take her payment without asking questions. But she wasn't disappearing. She was walking toward him. Every eye in the room followed her movement. Powerful men in $1,000 suits went rigid. Women clutched their champagne glasses. Minj's personal guards reached instinctively for their weapons, fingers twitching near concealed holsters, waiting for the signal that never came because their boss had raised one hand. Barely a gesture, just 2 fingers lifted from the armrest of his chair, and they froze. Minj himself sat perfectly still, his face carved from stone, his dark eyes tracking this impossible woman who was closing the distance between them with slow, deliberate steps. She moved like water, like smoke, like something that couldn't be stopped because it didn't understand it should be afraid. "Dance with me," she said. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but in that silent room it carried like a gunshot. For 5 seconds, nothing happened. Minj's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. A muscle jumped near his temple. His hands remained motionless on the armrests of his chair, but his knuckles had gone white. Then he stood. The collective gasp was audible. He took her hand, and something inside Kang Min-jae that had been dead for exactly 10 years, 2 months, and 17 days began to crack open like a tomb disturbed after centuries of silence. If you're already hooked, do me a favor, hit that like button right now. Trust me, you'll want to remember where you heard this story. And drop a comment telling me if you'd have the courage to touch a monster. Now let's go back to where this all started, because you need to understand what kind of man she just dared to dance with. 10 years earlier, Kang Min-jae had been different. Not soft, he was never soft, but human in ways that mattered. He smiled occasionally. He listened to music. He had a woman he loved. A brilliant attorney named Ji-won who understood his world without being consumed by it. She knew what he did. She knew the blood on his hands was real. But she believed in the parts of him that wanted something better, something cleaner, something that looked like a future instead of an endless present of violence and territory wars. They were supposed to get married in the spring. She died in the winter. The betrayal came from inside his own organization. A trusted lieutenant who wanted Minj's position and thought removing his humanity would be the first step to removing his power. They took Ji-won on a Tuesday afternoon, right outside the courthouse where she just won a case defending a small business owner against corporate fraud. 3 men, a black van, 17 hours of torture designed not to extract information but to destroy the woman Minj loved in ways that would destroy him too. When they dumped her body outside his compound, Minj didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't rage. He went silent. For 72 hours, he said nothing to anyone. He sat in his office with Ji-won's body in the next room. He wouldn't let them take her, wouldn't let them touch her, and methodically planned the death of every person involved. Not quick deaths, not merciful ones. He wanted them to understand what they'd done. He wanted them to feel every second of their mistake. When it was over, when the traitors had been erased so thoroughly that even their families stopped speaking their names, Minj made his vow. Never again. Never feel. Never trust. Never allow another human being close enough to matter. He built his empire higher and colder than before. He became the man whose name made negotiators nervous, whose reputation for ruthless efficiency preceded every meeting, whose word was absolute law because everyone knew he had nothing left to lose. He surrounded himself with men who feared him more than death. He conducted business with surgical precision. He expanded into legitimate enterprises, real estate, technology, entertainment, using his illegal operations to fund ventures that made him untouchable by law. And he never, ever let anyone touch him. His tailors took measurements from photographs. His doctor conducted examinations with instruments and sensors, never hands. When he signed contracts, he placed the pen down for others to retrieve. His world became a ballet of careful distance, of power exercised through words and gestures and the ever-present knowledge that Kang Min-jae had already lost everything that mattered, which made him the most dangerous kind of enemy. For 10 years, he felt nothing. For 10 years, he wanted nothing. For 10 years, he was a ghost in an expensive suit, running an empire from inside a self-imposed tomb. Until a woman named Zuri Thompson walked into his life and touched him like he was human. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. You need to understand her too, because this story isn't about a monster being saved by an angel. This is about two people who were both drowning in different oceans, and the impossible current that pulled them together. Zuri Thompson was 28 years old and tired in ways that had nothing to do with sleep. She was tired of being overlooked, tired of being underestimated, tired of watching less talented dancers get opportunities because they fit someone's idea of what a professional dancer should look like. She had the training, Juilliard scholarship, 3 years with a contemporary dance company in New York, performances across Europe. She had the skill. Critics called her magnetic, transcendent, impossible to look away from. What she didn't have was money. Her mother's medical bills had seen to that. Lupus was expensive, and insurance covered what insurance always covered, which was never enough. Her younger brother was in his second year at Howard University, studying engineering, and Zuri would cut off her own legs before she let him drop out because she couldn't make rent. Her father had died when she was 19, construction accident, settlement that barely covered the funeral, and she'd become the backbone of her family by default and determination. So when Marcus Chun, a promoter she'd worked with before, called her about a private gig that paid $15,000 for 1 hour of performance, she said yes before asking any questions. "It's a gala," Marcus told her over the phone. "Very exclusive, very private. The kind of people who don't like their names in the papers, if you know what I mean. I don't care if they're ghosts as long as the check clears," Zuri said. "It will." "But Zuri," Marcus hesitated. "These people are serious. Like, don't ask questions serious. You perform, you take your money, you forget you were ever there. Can you do that?" "Marcus, I've been pretending not to notice rich people's weird behavior since I started dancing professionally. I can handle one more night of looking the other way." "Okay, but dress sexy." They specifically requested, and I'm quoting here, "someone who moves like sin and looks like temptation." Zuri rolled her eyes. "So, a Tuesday. The gala was held at an estate outside the city, the kind of property that didn't appear on any map and required 3 security checkpoints just to reach the front gate. Zuri arrived 2 hours early for setup and rehearsal, but the moment she stepped out of the car, she knew this wasn't a normal event. The security wasn't the standard rent-a-cop variety. These were professionals, military bearing, cold eyes, hands that rested too comfortably near weapons she wasn't supposed to notice. The staff moved with nervous efficiency, setting up sound systems and lighting rigs like they were defusing bombs. Even the waiters looked tense. "What kind of party is this?" Zuri asked the sound engineer, a kid who couldn't have been more than 22. He glanced around before answering. "The kind where you smile, do your job, and don't remember any faces." "That's ominous." "That's accurate." Zuri had performed in strange places before. Underground clubs in Berlin, private yachts off the coast of Monaco, a tech billionaire's birthday party in an abandoned subway station. But this felt different. This felt dangerous in a way she couldn't articulate. Every instinct told her to take the deposit she'd already received and disappear. But $15,000 would cover her mother's medications for 4 months and her brother's next semester textbooks. So she stayed. The guests began arriving at 8. Zuri watched from behind the stage curtain as they filtered in. Men mostly, though a few women scattered among them, all dressed in elegant darkness, all moving with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. They didn't laugh loudly, didn't drink too much, didn't do anything that suggested celebration. This wasn't a party. This was a gathering, a meeting, something formal disguised as social. And then he arrived. Zuri didn't know who he was, but she knew immediately that he was the reason everyone else was there. The room's energy shifted the moment he stepped through the entrance. Conversations paused mid-sentence. People who had been casually networking suddenly stood straighter. The air itself seemed to compress under the weight of his presence. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with the build of someone who maintained discipline without vanity. His suit was black and perfectly tailored, expensive in a way that whispered rather than shouted. But it was his face that caught Zuri's attention. Sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, eyes so dark they looked black even under the chandeliers. He was beautiful in the way a knife was beautiful, all clean lines and lethal purpose. But it was his expression that made Zuri's breath catch. Or rather, his lack of expression. He looked like a man carved from ice, like someone who had forgotten how to feel anything at all. "Who is that?" Zuri whispered to a passing waiter. The waiter went pale. "You don't know? Would I ask if I knew? That's Kang Min-jae. And if you're smart, you'll perform your routine, take your money, and never speak his name again." The show was supposed to start at 9. Zuri had prepared a 6-minute contemporary piece to a haunting instrumental track. Something beautiful and safe, designed to impress without challenging. She'd performed it dozens of times. But when the music started and she took the floor, everything felt wrong. The audience wasn't watching her the way audiences usually watched. There was no appreciation, no engagement, no connection. They were looking at her like she was a distraction from something more important. Like she was furniture that happened to move. Except for him. Kang Min-jae sat in a high-backed chair near the front of the room. And from the moment Zuri began dancing, his eyes never left her. Not with lust. She'd seen that look 1,000 times and knew how to navigate it. This was different. He was watching her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Like she was somehow offensive just by existing in his space. It made her angry. Zuri Thompson had spent her entire career fighting to be seen as more than decoration. More than an exotic curiosity. More than someone else's fantasy. She had clawed her way into rooms where people like her weren't supposed to exist and demanded they acknowledge her artistry. And this cold, beautiful man in his expensive suit was looking at her like she was nothing. So when the music cut out unexpectedly, technical malfunction, someone later said, though Zuri never believed it, and the room fell into awkward silence, Zuri made a choice. She stopped dancing. She looked directly at Kang Min-jae, and she walked toward him. She could feel the panic rippling through the room like a physical force. Could hear the sharp intake of breath from multiple directions. Could sense his guards tensing, preparing for violence. But she kept walking. When she reached his chair, she extended her hand. "Dance with me," she said. For a moment, just a heartbeat, just a fraction of a second, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or confusion, or recognition of something he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed. Then he took her hand. His fingers were warm, strong. They closed around hers with careful pressure, like he was holding something fragile and dangerous at the same time. He stood. He was taller up close, broader. She could smell his cologne, something expensive and cedar dark. Could see the faint scar along his jawline. Could feel the tension radiating from his body like electricity. "You don't know what you're doing," he said quietly. His voice was deep, accented with Korean inflections that softened certain consonants. "Then teach me," Zuri replied. Something happened in his eyes. Something that looked almost like pain. He pulled her closer, not roughly but firmly, and began to move. There was no music, but they didn't need it. He led her across the floor in a slow, careful rhythm that felt more intimate than any choreographed routine. His hand on her waist burned through the thin fabric of her dress. His other hand held hers with a gentleness that contradicted everything she'd heard whispered about him. And he was shaking, barely, almost imperceptibly. But Zuri could feel it, the tremor in his fingers, the tension in his shoulders, the way his breathing had gone shallow and controlled. "When was the last time someone touched you?" she whispered. His jaw clenched. 10 years. Why? Because feeling anything is dangerous. Is this dangerous? He looked down at her, and for the first time his mask cracked completely. Yes. They danced in silence for another minute. The strangest, most charged minute of Zuri's life, before he released her hand and stepped back. Leave, he said. Tonight. Take triple your fee and forget you were here. What if I don't want to forget? His expression went cold again, the mask slamming back into place. Then you're a fool. He turned and walked away, disappearing through a side entrance with his guards flanking him like shadows. Zuri stood alone in the center of the ballroom, her heart pounding, her hands still tingling from where he'd touched her, while 200 dangerous people stared at her like she just committed suicide in slow motion. Marcus appeared at her elbow 30 seconds later, his face sheet white. What the hell was that? He hissed. I don't know, Zuri said honestly. Do you have any idea who that man is? Do you have any concept of what you just did? He looked lonely. Marcus grabbed her arm. He's a monster, Zuri. He's killed people. He runs half the illegal operations on the East Coast. And you just touched him like he was human. Maybe he is. Get your things. We're leaving. Now. Zuri let Marcus drag her backstage. Let him shove her payment. $45,000 instead of 15. She noticed. Into her hands, let him practically throw her into a car. But as they drove away from that impossible estate, she couldn't stop thinking about the way Kang Min-jae's hand had trembled when he touched her. She didn't forget. She couldn't. And that was her first mistake. Kang Min-jae didn't sleep that night. He sat in his office with the lights off, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. He could still feel her, the warmth of her skin, the strength in her dancer's body, the way she'd looked at him without fear or calculation or greed, like he was just a man who'd been asked to dance. It had been 10 years since anyone touched him. 10 years since he'd allowed himself to feel the simple human contact of skin on skin. And in less than 3 minutes, this impossible woman had undone a decade of careful control. He was furious. He was terrified. He was alive. Find out everything about her. He told his head of security, a former North Korean intelligence officer named Park who defected 8 years ago and pledged loyalty with the kind of finality that only came from burning every other bridge. I want to know where she lives, where she works, who she loves, who owes her money, what she eats for breakfast. Everything. Park didn't question the order, didn't point out that this violated every principle Minj had established. He just nodded and disappeared to do his job. The file arrived 6 hours later. Zuri Thompson, 28, professional dancer, Juilliard graduate, no criminal record, no concerning suggestions, supported her mother and younger brother. 3 jobs, teaching dance classes at a community center, occasional performances, and part-time work at an upscale restaurant. She was nobody, a normal person who'd stumbled into his world by accident and would disappear back into her own life without consequence. Except Minj couldn't stop thinking about her. He tried. God, he tried. He buried himself in work. 3 contract negotiations, 2 territory disputes, 1 very careful conversation with a federal prosecutor who'd been getting too curious about his legitimate businesses. He went 72 hours without sleep, fueled by coffee and force of will. It didn't matter. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt her hand in his. Every quiet moment, he heard her voice asking why he looked lonely. On the 4th day, he broke. Bring her to me, he told Park. Sir, don't argue. Just do it. She won't come willingly. Then convince her. But don't hurt her. Don't frighten her more than necessary. And Park, Minjae's voice went dangerously soft. If anyone touches her inappropriately, I'll kill them myself. Park's eyes widened fractionally. Understood. Zuri was teaching a children's ballet class when the men arrived. 2 of them, both Korean, both wearing suits that cost more than her monthly rent. They waited politely at the back of the studio until class ended, until the last parent collected their child, until Zuri was alone. Then they approached. Ms. Thompson, we need you to come with us. Her heart started racing. I don't think so. It's not a request. Then it's a kidnapping. And I'm calling the police. The taller one, Park, though she didn't know his name yet, pulled out a phone and showed her a photograph. Her mother, leaving her dialysis appointment. Her brother walking across campus. No threats, Park said calmly. Just information. Mr. Kang would like to speak with you. You can come now in comfort and safety, or you can make this difficult and achieve the same result with more stress for everyone involved. Zuri's hands clenched into fists. If I come with you, will you leave my family alone? Your family was never in danger. We're simply demonstrating that Mr. Kang takes his security seriously. That's a hell of a way to ask for a conversation. Mr. Kang is a hell of a man. The drive took 40 minutes. They didn't blindfold her, didn't restrain her, didn't do anything except offer her water and answer 0 of her questions. They took her back to the estate where the gala had been held, through corridors she hadn't seen before, into a wing that felt more like a luxury apartment than a crime lord's headquarters. Kang Min-jae was waiting in what looked like a private study. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A desk that probably cost more than Zuri's college education. Windows overlooking gardens that somehow looked beautiful and menacing at the same time. He stood when she entered, dismissed his guards with a gesture. They were alone. You can leave any time you want, he said immediately. I won't stop you. But I need to talk to you, and I need you to understand that what happened at the gala. He stopped, collected himself. I haven't been touched in 10 years. You need to understand what that means. So explain it, Zuri said. She was trying to sound brave, but her voice shook. He heard it. Something in his expression softened fractionally. Sit. Please. Zuri sat. Not because she was obedient, but because her legs felt unsteady. Minj remained standing, keeping distance between them like it was a safety measure. 10 years ago I was engaged, he said, to a woman I loved more than anything in this world. Someone in my organization decided that made me weak. They kidnapped her, tortured her, killed her, left her body where I'd find it. Zuri's breath caught. I made a choice after that, Minj continued. His voice was perfectly controlled, but Zuri could see the tension in his shoulders. I decided that feeling anything was a liability I couldn't afford. I removed every source of human connection from my life. No relationships, no friendships, no physical contact. I built walls so high that nothing could reach me. That's not living, Zuri whispered. That's just surviving. Surviving was enough. Was? He looked at her directly. You touched me like I was human, like I deserved kindness. And I felt something I haven't felt in 10 years. What? Hope. And it's terrifying. Zuri stood slowly. Why am I here? Because I can't stop thinking about you. Because you've undone something I spent a decade building. Because, he stopped. Because I don't know what to do with what I'm feeling. And I needed to see you again to understand if it was real or just a moment of weakness. And, it's real. Which makes you the most dangerous person in my life. They stared at each other across 8 feet of expensive carpet. I'm not afraid of you, Zuri said. You should be. Why? Because you hurt people? Because you run a criminal empire? I grew up in neighborhoods where people hurt each other for $20 and street corners. I've seen violence. I've seen what poverty does to good people. You think your darkness scares me? It should. What scares me, Zuri said, taking one step closer, is how much I wanted you to keep holding my hand. What scares me is that I came here willingly even though every logical part of my brain knows this is insane. What scares me is that you look at me like I'm the first real thing you've seen in years, and I don't know what to do with that. Minjae's control cracked. You should run. Then why did you bring me here? Because I'm selfish. Because I'm tired. Because for 10 years I've been a ghost, and you made me feel alive, and He stopped. Turned away. This is wrong. You should go. Zuri didn't move. What if I don't want to? Then you're making a terrible mistake. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. The silence stretched between them like a living thing. Finally, Minj spoke without turning around. If you stay, if you choose to be part of my life in any capacity, you become a target. My enemies will see you as leverage. My allies will see you as a weakness. You'll live in danger every day. And if I leave, I'll make sure you're protected. I'll make sure your family is safe. I'll make sure you never have to worry about money again. But I won't contact you. I won't see you. I'll go back to being the man I was before you touched me. Is that what you want? He turned, looked at her with eyes that held a decade of loneliness. No. Then stop trying to make my decisions for me. Zuri, I'm 28 years old. I've been making impossible choices my entire adult life. I've chosen between my dreams and my family. I've chosen between dignity and survival. I've performed for people who saw me as an object and smiled through it because I needed the money. Don't stand there and tell me I don't understand the weight of a decision. This is different. How? Because if something happens to you because of me, I won't survive it. Not again. The raw honesty in his voice stopped her cold. Then don't let anything happen to me, Zuri said quietly. You're supposed to be this all-powerful crime lord, right? So protect me. But don't push me away because you're afraid. Minj crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, stopped inches from her, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body, close enough to see the war happening behind his eyes. I don't know how to do this, he said. I don't know how to care about someone without destroying them. Then we'll figure it out together. He reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to move away, and cupped her face in his hands. His touch was gentle, reverent, like she was something precious and breakable. You're absolutely sure? He asked. No. But I'm sure I want to try. He kissed her then, soft and careful and achingly tender. It lasted 3 seconds, maybe 4. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with something that looked like tears. I'll keep you safe, he promised. Whatever it costs, whatever I have to do, I won't let anyone hurt you. I believe you, and God help her, she did. If you're still watching, drop a comment right now telling me if you think Zuri just made the best or worst decision of her life. And hit subscribe because this story is about to get so much more complicated. For 2 weeks, Zuri lived in a strange new reality. Minj kept his distance physically. No more touches, no more kisses, just conversations that stretched into the early morning hours. He told her about his empire. She told him about her dreams of opening her own dance company. He explained the careful balance of power that kept his world running. She taught him about contemporary dance theory. It was bizarre and beautiful and terrifying. He assigned guards to watch her. Discreetly, he promised, though Zuri spotted them immediately. He had someone fix her mother's roof and pay off her brother's student loans. Anonymous donations that fooled no one but allowed everyone to pretend they didn't know where the money came from. And slowly, carefully, Kang Min-jae began to smile again. It was small things at first, the corner of his mouth twitching when Zuri said something unexpectedly funny. A genuine laugh during one of their late-night conversations. The way his whole face softened when she talked about teaching kids to dance. He was coming back to life, which meant people noticed. The first threat came from a rival organization, Russian mob with interests in the same territories. They sent a message through traditional channels. Kang Min-jae was getting soft, distracted. Maybe it was time for new leadership in the Korean districts. Min-jae's response was swift and brutal. He dismantled their protection rackets in 48 hours, turned 3 of their lieutenants into informants, and sent back a message that made it clear his attention to detail hadn't wavered one bit. But the Russians had been right about one thing. He was distracted, and his own people were starting to notice. You're different, Park said during one of their strategy meetings. Since the woman, her name is Zuri. Since Zuri, then, you're different. Is that a problem? Park hesitated. It's a vulnerability. People are talking. Let them talk. With respect, sir, that's not like you. You've spent 10 years eliminating vulnerabilities. Now you're creating one deliberately. Minj looked at his most trusted advisor. Tell me honestly, have I been less effective? Have I made mistakes? Have I put our operations at risk? No. But then my personal life is my concern. Park bowed slightly. Of course. I just want you to understand that others may not see it that way. Others can fall in line or find themselves without a line to stand in. But Park's warning echoed in Min-jae's mind long after the meeting ended. He knew the danger. Knew that every moment he spent with Zuri painted a target on her back. Knew that sooner or later someone would try to use her against him. He just didn't expect it to happen so soon. Zuri was leaving the restaurant where she worked her part-time shifts when the van pulled up. 3 men. Not Min-jae's. She knew immediately because his guards wore specific watches. She'd learned to identify them, and these men's wrists were bare. She ran. Made it half a block before they caught her. Dragged her into the van. Zip-tied her wrists. "Don't fight," one of them said in accented English. "We're not going to hurt you. You're just insurance." Insurance for what? To remind Kang Min-jae that he's not untouchable. They took her to a warehouse in an industrial area she didn't recognize. Tied her to a chair. Left her alone with one guard while the others made phone calls in Korean she couldn't understand. Zuri's mind raced. She wasn't stupid. She knew this was exactly what Min-jae had warned her about. Knew that loving him came with consequences. But knowing something intellectually and living it were very different experiences. She was terrified. Not for herself, though she was definitely afraid, but for what Min-jae would do when he found out. She'd seen the darkness in him, the capacity for violence that lurked just beneath his careful control. If these men hurt her, he would burn the world down to get revenge. And she didn't want to be the reason he destroyed himself. Min-jae found out 17 minutes after Zuri was taken. His guards had been following at a discreet distance, too far to prevent the kidnapping, close enough to track the van. He went absolutely cold. Not angry, not panicked, just cold. "Who?" he asked Park.
Lee Young-soo's fiction.
"They're demanding a meeting to discuss territory redistribution." They took her to demand territory? They took her to prove you're compromised. Min-jae stood. "Get everyone. Every soldier we have. I want Jong-soo's entire operation mapped out in 30 minutes. Sir, if we move too aggressively." They touched her, Park. They put their hands on her. There is no proportional response. There's only total annihilation. She wouldn't want you to start a war over this. Min-jae's voice dropped to a whisper. Then she should have chosen a different man to care about. The assault was surgical. Min-jae's forces hit 3 of Jong-soo's operations simultaneously: money-counting houses, weapons storage, a high-stakes gambling operation. They didn't kill anyone unless they had to, but the message was clear. Every hour Zuri remained captive, Jong-soo lost another piece of his empire. Jong-soo called within 2 hours. "You're overreacting," he said. "The woman is fine. We just needed to have a conversation. Release her now, and I'll let you leave the city alive. Or what? You'll destroy everything you've built over one girl. Try me." 12 hours later, Zuri was released unharmed. Dropped off at the same restaurant where she'd been taken, with an apology from Jong-soo delivered through intermediaries. Min-jae met her there personally, the first time he'd appeared in public with her, the first time he'd allowed anyone to see how much she mattered. He pulled her into his arms the moment he saw her, held her so tightly she couldn't breathe. "I'm okay," she whispered. "They didn't hurt me. I should have protected you better. You did protect me. I'm here." He pulled back, cupped her face in his hands. "This is going to keep happening. As long as you're with me, you'll be in danger." "I know. And you're still sure?" Zuri looked at this impossible man who'd been dead inside for 10 years until she touched him, who'd just gone to war over her safety, who was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "I'm sure. Then I need to change everything." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been running this empire with fear and distance because I thought that made me strong. But you've shown me something different. You've shown me that real strength is allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to care, to trust." "Min-jae, I'm not stepping away from my organization, but I'm changing how I lead it. More delegation, more trust in my lieutenants, more focus on the legitimate businesses. I'm going to build something that doesn't require me to be a monster every day. That's going to take time. I have time. We have time." Zuri smiled. We have time. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Minj spent months carefully restructuring his organization, promoting trusted people to positions of real authority, slowly extracting himself from the day-to-day violence that had defined his life for so long. It wasn't easy. There were challenges, internal power struggles, external threats, moments when the old Minj would have responded with overwhelming force and the new Minj had to find different solutions. But Zuri was there through all of it. Not as decoration or distraction, but as a partner. She helped him see perspectives he'd never considered, challenged him when his instincts toward violence overwhelmed his better judgment, reminded him why he was trying to change. And slowly, Kang Min-jae became human again. He started listening to music, attending performances, smiling in public. He funded Zuri's dance company, not as a controlling investor but as a silent partner, giving her the resources to build her dream without interference. He became the man Ji-won had seen in him all those years ago. The man who could be powerful without being cruel, who could lead without being a monster. 8 months after that dance at the gala, Minj asked Zuri to marry him. They were in his private quarters, just the two of them, with soft music playing for the first time in over a decade. Dance with me, he said, extending his hand. Zuri smiled and took it. Haven't we done this before? That was different. I was terrified then. I'm terrified now, but for better reasons. They swayed together in the quiet room, his arms around her waist, her head resting against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat. Steady, strong, alive. I never thought I'd feel this again, he said quietly. After Ji-won died, I convinced myself that loving someone was the same as signing their death warrant, that caring about anything made me weak. And now I understand that I had it backwards. Refusing to feel anything didn't make me strong. It made me empty. You didn't make me weak, Zuri. You made me whole. She looked up at him. Is this the part where you ask me to marry you? How did you know? Because you get this look on your face when you're about to do something that scares you, like you're preparing for battle. He laughed. A real, genuine laugh that transformed his entire face. Being vulnerable with you is scarier than any fight I've ever been in. Good thing I'm patient. He stopped dancing, reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Zuri Thompson, you walked into my life when I was a dead man wearing an expensive suit. You touched me like I deserved kindness. You looked at me like I was human. You chose me even when everyone, including me, told you it was a terrible idea. You're not selling this very well, she said, but her eyes were bright with tears. I'm not finished. You chose me and that choice changed everything. It brought me back to life. It showed me that I could be more than what I'd become. It gave me a reason to build something better instead of just maintaining something cold. He opened the box. The ring inside was simple, a single diamond on a platinum band, elegant without being ostentatious. I can't promise you safety. I can't promise you a normal life, but I can promise you that I will spend every day trying to be worthy of the choice you made. I will protect you with everything I have. I will love you with everything I am. And I will never, ever take for granted the gift you gave me when you dared to touch a monster and see a man. Zuri was crying now, tears streaming down her face. So will you marry me? Yes, she whispered. Yes, absolutely yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled just like they had that first night. Then he kissed her, deep and slow and filled with 10 years' worth of suppressed emotion. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zuri smiled up at him. You know what this means, right? What? You're going to have to learn to dance properly. I'm not marrying someone who only knows how to sway. He laughed again. I'll hire the best instructors. You'll learn from me. Even better. They married 3 months later in a private ceremony that blended both their worlds. Her family and friends on one side, his trusted people on the other, everyone pretending not to notice the security detail positioned strategically around the venue. Zuri's mother cried through the entire ceremony. Her brother gave a toast that made Minj laugh and tear up simultaneously. Park, stoic as ever, presented them with a gift from the entire organization. a donation in their names to the community center where Zuri taught dance. It wasn't traditional. It wasn't safe. It wasn't anything either of them had planned. But it was real. And for the first time in over a decade, Kang Min-jae looked toward the future and saw something other than an endless gray expanse of carefully controlled emptiness. He saw home. The next 2 years were a careful balancing act. Minj continued distancing himself from the violent aspects of his organization, building legitimate business interests that would eventually overshadow his criminal empire. It was slow work, you didn't walk away from that kind of power overnight, but he was methodical and patient. Zuri's dance company flourished. She hired other dancers who'd been overlooked by mainstream companies, created programs for underprivileged kids, built something that mattered beyond just art for art's sake. They bought a house together. Not the fortress-like estate where Minj had lived for years, but a real home with windows that let in light and a garden where Zuri could practice outdoors. They fought sometimes, usually about his overprotective instincts or her tendency to downplay legitimate threats. But they always came back to each other. And Minj kept learning to dance. Not professionally. He'd never have Zuri's grace or technical skill, but well enough to surprise her on their first anniversary by taking her to a performance and then leading her in a proper waltz during the reception afterward. "You've been practicing," she said, impressed. "3 times a week for 6 months. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted to surprise you. Because you gave me so much, and I wanted to give you something back. You've given me everything." "Not everything. Not yet. What else is there?" He pulled her closer. "A life. A real life. One where I'm not looking over my shoulder every day. One where we can have children without me worrying they'll be used as leverage. One where I'm just a man who loves his wife and runs a few businesses and maybe learns to play golf or whatever normal people do." "You'd be terrible at golf." "Probably. But I'd try." "When?" Zuri asked seriously. "When can you step away?" "Soon. Another year, maybe 18 months. I have good people in place. The legitimate businesses are generating enough revenue that we don't need the other operations. I just need to make sure the transition doesn't create a power vacuum that starts a war. And then I'm yours. Completely. No divided attention. No late-night emergency calls. Just us." Zuri kissed him softly. "I'll hold you to that. I'm counting on it." But fate, as it often does, had other plans. The threat came from an unexpected source, not a rival organization or internal betrayal, but law enforcement. A federal task force had been building a case against Minj's organization for 3 years, and they were finally ready to move. Park brought the news during a family dinner. Something that had become a weekly tradition, just Minj, Zuri, and his closest advisors sharing a meal like normal people. "We have a problem," Park said, his face grim. "Federal indictments are coming. Multiple agencies, FBI, DEA, IRS. They have witnesses, wiretaps, financial records." Minj went very still. "How bad?" "Bad enough that they're talking about RICO charges. They're going after the entire organization, top to bottom." "How long do we have?" "Days. Maybe hours." Zuri's hand found Minj's under the table, squeezed tight. "What are our options?" Minj asked. "Run, fight, or negotiate." Running means leaving everything behind. Fighting means a trial that could last years and destroy everything we've built. Negotiating means... What? Park hesitated. "It means you give them someone. You provide testimony against the parts of the organization you've been distancing yourself from anyway. You help them dismantle the criminal operations in exchange for immunity on the legitimate businesses." "I'd have to testify against my own people. Against the people who've resisted the changes you've been trying to make. The ones who've been fighting you on every reform. The ones who would gladly throw you to the federal government if it meant they could take over." Minj looked at Zuri. "What do you think?" "I think," she said carefully, "that you've been trying to build something better for 2 years, and this might be the universe giving you a very painful way to finish that transition. It feels like betrayal. It feels like survival. There's a difference." Minj spent 3 days in meetings with lawyers, the expensive kind who specialized in federal criminal defense and knew how to navigate the complex world of plea agreements and immunity deals. The deal they worked out was brutal but fair. Minj would provide detailed information about the criminal operations he'd been trying to eliminate anyway. He'd testify in closed hearings against the faction of his organization that had resisted reform. In exchange, he'd receive immunity from prosecution. His legitimate businesses would be allowed to continue under strict oversight, and he'd be officially out of organized crime. It meant burning bridges he'd spent years building. It meant ending relationships with people who'd been loyal to him. It meant accepting that some people would call him a traitor for the rest of his life. But it also meant freedom. If I do this, he told Zuri the night before he signed the agreement, there's no going back. I'll be out completely. No power. No protection from the organization. Just a businessman with a complicated past. Isn't that what you wanted? I wanted to leave on my own terms. This feels like surrender. This feels like choosing life over death, Zuri said. Choosing me over power. Choosing the future over the past. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's impossible and terrifying and completely insane. Just like everything else about us. He pulled her into his arms.
I'm scared.
I know. But you're brave enough to be scared and do it anyway. How do you always know the right thing to say? I don't. I just know you. And I know that the man I married isn't the same man who built a criminal empire on fear and isolation. You're better than that now. So be better. He signed the agreement the next morning. The testimony took months. Detailed depositions, closed hearings, careful navigation of legal complexities. Minj provided information that led to 37 indictments, the seizure of millions in illegal assets, and the effective dismantling of the criminal operations he'd once controlled. Some people called him a hero for helping bring down organized crime. Others called him a traitor and a coward. Death threats came regularly. Park had to maintain security details despite Minj's official separation from the organization. But slowly, carefully, he built a new life. His legitimate businesses thrived under proper legal oversight. He became a philanthropist, funding community programs and supporting causes that mattered to Zuri. He learned to live without the constant weight of violence and secrecy. And he kept learning to dance. On their third anniversary, Minj surprised Zuri with a performance. He'd been working with a choreographer for months, learning a contemporary piece set to the same music that had been playing the night they met. Zuri cried watching him move, not with her grace or technical perfection, but with genuine emotion and commitment. He'd never be a professional dancer, but he was dancing for the right reasons. When the music ended, he walked to her and extended his hand. Dance with me, he said. It was the same invitation she'd given him 3 years ago, but everything about the context had changed. Then, he'd been a dead man going through the motions of life. Now he was alive. Fully, completely, messily alive. Then, she'd been a stranger taking a terrible risk. Now, she was his wife, his partner, his reason for choosing light over darkness. They danced together in the studio, surrounded by Zuri's students and Minj's former guards and both their families. An impossible collision of worlds that somehow worked. Do you regret it? Zuri asked as they swayed together. Giving up all that power? Every day, Minj said honestly. And not at all. That doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. I miss the certainty, the control, the feeling of being untouchable. But I don't miss being dead inside. I don't miss living in fear that caring about anything would destroy me. I don't miss being alone. You're never alone now. Exactly. You asked me once when the last time someone touched me was. It had been 10 years. Now I can't remember the last hour you weren't touching me in some way. Holding my hand, leaning against me, just existing in the same space. Is that okay? It's everything. They kept dancing as the sun set through the studio windows, painting everything gold and warm. I have something to tell you, Zuri said quietly. What?
I'm pregnant.
Minj stopped moving, stared at her. What? Are you? How long have you known? 2 weeks. I wanted to wait until tonight to tell you. He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. She could feel him shaking. "Are you okay?" she asked.
I'm terrified. I'm elated.
"I'm completely overwhelmed. He pulled back, cupped her face in his hands. "I'm going to be a father." "Yes, you are. What if I'm not good at it? What if I can't protect them? What if you love them the way you love me? What if you teach them that being strong means being vulnerable? What if you show them how to dance?" He kissed her then, deep and desperate and filled with hope. "Thank you," he whispered against her lips. "For what? For touching me, for seeing me, for choosing me, for giving me a reason to become human again. You were always human, Minj. You just forgot for a while. Then thank you for reminding me." Their daughter was born 7 months later. A healthy, beautiful baby girl they named Ji-won, after the woman whose death had nearly destroyed Minj and whose memory he'd finally made peace with. Zuri's mother moved in to help with the baby. Minj hired a full-time nanny but insisted on doing most of the childcare himself. Changing diapers, midnight feedings, long walks around the neighborhood while cradling his daughter against his chest. He was awkward at first, terrified of doing something wrong, but he learned. And watching him with their daughter, Zuri saw the final pieces of his transformation complete. The man who'd once been untouchable spent hours just holding his baby girl. The man who'd sworn never to feel anything cried the first time she smiled at him. The man who'd built an empire on fear and isolation became someone who sang lullabies off-key and made silly faces to hear his daughter laugh. "You're staring," Minj said one evening, catching Zuri watching him play with 6-month-old Ji-won.
I'm appreciating.
"Appreciating what? How far you've come. The man I met 3.5 years ago would never have believed he could be this happy. The man you met 3.5 years ago was barely a man at all. Just a shell going through the motions. And now." He looked down at his daughter, who was gripping his finger with her tiny hand. "Now I'm the luckiest person alive. I have a wife who sees the best in me even when I can't see it myself. I have a daughter who trusts me completely even though I'm making this up as I go. I have a life that's messy and complicated and absolutely nothing like I planned. And I wouldn't change a single thing. Not even the scary parts? Especially not the scary parts. The scary parts are what made us real." Zuri crossed the room and wrapped her arms around both of them, her husband and her daughter, her impossible family. "I love you," she said. "I love you too. Both of you. More than I thought I was capable of." Little Ji-won made a happy gurgling sound, and they both laughed. 5 years after that first dance, Kang Min-jae stood in the wings of Zuri's dance company's theater, watching his wife perform the opening number of their annual showcase. She moved with the same magnetic grace that had first caught his attention, but now she danced with joy instead of desperation, with freedom instead of survival. Their daughter sat on his shoulders, watching her mother with wide eyes. "Mama beautiful," Ji-won said. "Yes, she is. You dance like Mama?" "Not even close. But I try." "Daddy dance with me?" Min-jae smiled, the kind of full, genuine smile that had been impossible for him just a few years ago. "Always, sweetheart. I'll always dance with you." The performance ended to thunderous applause. Zuri took her bows, scanning the audience until she found her family. When her eyes met Min-jae's, she smiled so brightly it made his chest ache. After the show, after the congratulations and the celebrations, after they'd put Ji-won to bed, Min-jae and Zuri stood in their living room with soft music playing. "Dance with me," he said, extending his hand. It had become their ritual, the same invitation, the same gesture, but different every time because they were different every time. She took his hand. They swayed together in the quiet house, both thinking about how impossible this moment would have seemed 10 years ago. How a single touch, a single choice, a single moment of courage had changed everything. "Do you ever think about that night?" Zuri asked. "The gala? Every day. Regrets? Not even one. You? Just one." He pulled back, concerned. "What? I should have asked you to dance sooner." He laughed and pulled her close again. "I wasn't ready sooner. I needed to be completely dead inside before I could appreciate being brought back to life." "That's very dramatic." "I'm a very dramatic person." You knew this when you married me. I did. And I'd do it again. Yeah. Yeah. They kept dancing as the night grew later, as the music played softer, as the world outside continued spinning without caring about their small miracle. Some men were saved by power, some by money, some by violence. Kang Min-jae was saved by a woman who dared to touch his broken soul and refused to let go. And in learning to be touched, he learned to be human again. Before we end this story, I need you to do something for me. If the story moved you, if it made you feel something, hit that like button right now. Leave a comment telling me what moment hit you hardest. Was it the first dance, the kidnapping, the proposal, or something else entirely? And subscribe to this channel because I have so many more stories like this one. Stories about impossible love and second chances and people who choose each other against all odds. This is the truth about healing. It doesn't happen in grand gestures or dramatic moments. It happens in quiet rooms with soft music. It happens when someone sees your darkness and chooses to stay anyway. It happens when you're brave enough to be vulnerable with someone who deserves your trust. Kang Min-jae spent 10 years being untouchable, and it nearly destroyed him. But one woman with courage and grace touched him anyway, and that single act of defiance against his carefully constructed walls became the beginning of everything. Some men are not saved by power, by wealth, or by conquest. Some men are saved by the courage of a woman who dares to touch their broken soul and whisper, "Dance with me." And sometimes, miraculously, impossibly, they do.